Ratification of the Constitution. To approve the Constitution, 9 out of the 13 states had to approve the Constitution. This was against the Articles of Confederation rules, which required 13 out of 13. The Federalists were for the Constitution and approving it. The Anti-Federalists were against ratifying the Constitution. These were the first two political parties of the United States, the first two groups, and they fought over the Constitution. The Anti-Federalists feared 5 things. 1. A strong central government would be distant from the people and use powers to absorb the functions that belong to the states. 2. Congress would tax heavily the people. 3. The Supreme Court would overrule state courts. 4. The President would head a large standing army. And 5. The lack of Bill of Rights. The Bill of Rights was actually added to the Constitution later, but those 4 items, the Anti-Federalists, their fears actually did come true, as there is a strong central government in Washington, D.C. that's distant. It uses powers that actually goes over, just like gay marriage or other things that belong to the states. Now the government takes over. Congress, in many cases, people think tax heavily. The Supreme Court will overrule state courts and legislature. And the President right now is the head, the commander-in-chief of the largest, strongest military in the world. Number 4, the Federalist Papers were used to actually try to adopt the Constitution, to convince people in New York to approve it. They were written by John Jay, James Madison, and Alexander Hamilton to help persuade people in New York to adopt it. They were published in New York newspapers. They had a pen name, Publius. 85 articles were written. Alexander Hamilton wrote 51, James Madison wrote 26, John Jay wrote 5, and 3 were co-authored by Alexander Hamilton and James Madison. Federalist Papers 10 and 51 were the most famous. They were written by Madison. He stated basically a well-constructed union can break and control the violence of a faction. Faction is his terms for a political party. He also wrote, if men were angels, no government would be needed. So talking about the need to have a republic. The Anti-Federalists wrote their own papers in response to the ratification to try to get it to not be approved. They were not in one book or one newspaper. Authors were George Clinton, Richard Henry Lee, Samuel Bryant, Robert Yates, and others. They had funny pen names like Brutus, Cato, and Sentinel. By June 21st, 1788, the 9th state ratified the Constitution, but the states did not include New York or Virginia, and these were the 2 largest states. So they really needed those 2 states to really make it the Union. Finally, by spring 1790, all 13 states had ratified the Constitution. Ratifying the Constitution went from like 1787 to 1790, and it was a long process to get all the states to agree to the Constitution. So now, anytime you need to amend a Constitution, that's a different thing. Ratification is just approving the Constitution and making it go into effect. George Washington was the first president, and the first capital was in the state of New York, in the city of New York there. If you have any questions, post online or ask in class.